Rachel, what are you hiding from me? I'm not just a caregiver. I'm your wife. My voice trembled as I confronted my husband, my eyes threatening to spill over. Rachel looked up from his laptop, his expression a mix of annoyance and dismissal. Monica, please, I don't have time for your dramatics. I have important work to do. I clenched my fists, the hidden drawer of love letters and intimate photos burning in my mind. Don't brush me off like I'm some hired help. I found your little secret stash. Who is she? Rachel sighed, closing his laptop. It was a long time ago, before we were married. Ancient history. Ancient history? I scoffed. Those photos look pretty recent to me, and the letters are dated from last year. Enough, Rachel snapped, his voice sharp. I don't have to explain myself to you. Your job is to take care of my mother, not pry into my personal affairs. I recoiled as if he'd slapped me. Your mother? Is that all I am to you? A glorified nurse? Rachel stood, towering over me. Don't be so dramatic. You knew what you were getting into when you married into this family. I opened my mouth to protest, but he cut me off. I have to go. Mother needs her medication. He brushed past me, leaving me trembling with a potent mix of anger and hurt. As the front door slammed, I sank onto the couch, tears streaming down my cheeks. How had my life come to this? I was a successful caregiver before meeting Rachel, respected and independent. Now I felt like a prisoner in my own home, trapped by the weight of his indifference and the secrets he kept. But as the anger simmered within me, a newfound determination took root. I wouldn't be dismissed or ignored any longer. It was time to take control of my life and uncover the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. I wiped my tears and stood, my hands steady. Rachel might think he could brush me aside, but he had no idea what I was capable of. I was done being the obedient wife. It was time to fight back. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I pored over the hidden letters and photos, piecing together the sordid details of Rachel's affair. The woman's name was Samantha, and their trysts had been going on for years, even after our marriage. But the betrayal ran deeper than just infidelity. I also uncovered evidence of financial mismanagement, with Rachel siphoning funds from his mother's accounts for his own use. Judith, my frail mother-in-law, was being taken advantage of by her own son. As the truth unraveled, my anger grew, fueled by a newfound sense of purpose. I wouldn't just confront Rachel. I would take back control of my life and protect Judith from further exploitation. The day Rachel returned from one of his business trips, I was ready. I laid out the evidence on the coffee table, my hands trembling with a mix of nerves and anticipation. When he walked through the door, his eyes widened at the sight of the damning letters and bank statements. Monica, what is all this? I met his gaze, my voice steady. The truth, Rachel. The truth about your affair, your lies, and your betrayal of this family. His expression hardened. How dare you go through my personal belongings? How dare you treat me like a servant in my own home? I shot back. I'm your wife, not some hired help, and I won't stand for your disrespect any longer. Rachel opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing him. It's my turn to talk. I know everything about Samantha, about the money you've been stealing from your mother. It ends now. His face paled, and for the first time I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. I had finally taken back control, and there was no turning back. As I laid out my demands, a divorce, full custody of the assets, and a promise to never mistreat Judith again, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The shackles of my oppression were finally broken, and a new chapter of my life was beginning. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to fight for my independence and my self-respect. Rachel had underestimated me for far too long, but those days were over. I was a force to be reckoned with, and nothing would stand in my way. The sprawling Victorian house loomed before me, its weathered exterior a stark contrast to the immaculate grounds. As I stepped inside, the musty scent of old furniture and faded memories enveloped me. "Welcome to your new home," Rachel said flatly, setting down my suitcase. "Mother's room is down the hall, and Karen's is upstairs." I nodded, already feeling like an intruder in this place. Rachel had made it clear that my role was to care for his aging mother, Judith, while he and his sister, Karen, handled the important matters. As if on cue, Karen descended the staircase, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer outfit a sharp contrast to the house's faded grandeur. Her eyes narrowed as she appraised me. "So, you're the new help," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "I hope you're up to the task of caring for Mother. She can be quite demanding." I bristled at her dismissive tone, but before I could respond, a frail voice called out from down the hall. "Rachel? Is that you, dear?" Rachel sighed and gestured for me to follow. "Come on, let's get you acquainted with Mother." Judith's room was a sanctuary of sorts, filled with plush furnishings and the scent of lavender. The elderly woman herself was propped up in bed, her once vibrant features now etched with age and weariness. "Mother, this is Monica," Rachel said, his tone softening slightly. "She'll be taking care of you from now on." Judith's eyes brightened as she regarded me. "Oh, how lovely. It's so nice to have a friendly face around here." Karen scoffed from the doorway. "Don't get too attached, Mother. She's just the help." Judith's expression hardened. "Karen, that's enough. Monica is a guest in our home, and she will be treated with respect." I felt a surge of gratitude towards Judith, even as Karen rolled her eyes and stalked away. At least one person in this family seemed to have a shred of decency. Over the next few days, I settled into a routine of caring for Judith's needs while navigating the treacherous waters of the household dynamics. Karen made no secret of her disdain for me, constantly belittling my efforts and questioning my competence. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" she would sneer as I helped Judith with her medication or physical therapy. Mother deserves only the best care. Judith, bless her soul, would always come to my defense. "Karen, stop harassing the poor girl. Monica is doing an excellent job." Still, the constant criticism wore me down, and I found myself retreating to the solitude of Judith's room whenever possible. There, at least, I could escape the weight of Karen's hostility and Rachel's indifference. One afternoon, as I was helping Judith with her exercises, she fixed me with a piercing gaze. "Monica, dear, you seem troubled. Is everything all right?" I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal, but there was a kindness in Judith's eyes that compelled me to open up. "It's just this household, your family." I trailed off, searching for the right words. "Karen treats me like a servant, and Rachel barely acknowledges my existence. I feel so alone here." Judith's expression softened. "I know, dear. Karen has always been difficult. And Rachel, well, he's become a different man than the son I raised." She reached out and patted my hand. "But you mustn't let them break your spirit. You're a strong, capable woman, and you deserve far better than the way they've treated you." Her words ignited a spark within me, a newfound determination to stand up for myself and uncover the truth behind this family's secrets. If Judith could see my worth, then perhaps it was time I started seeing it too. As I helped Judith back into bed, I made a silent vow. No more would I cower in the face of Karen's cruelty or Rachel's neglect. I would unravel the mysteries of this household, one thread at a time, until I regained control of my life and my dignity. The weight of unseen chains had held me down for too long, but with Judith's support and my own resilience, I would break free, no matter what it took. The shrill ring of the phone pierced the silence, shattering the fragile tranquility that had settled over the house. I hurried to answer it, half expecting Rachel's voice on the other end. "Hello? Monica, it's me." Rachel's tone was clipped, businesslike. "I have some news." I steeled myself, bracing for whatever bombshell he was about to drop. With Rachel, it was always one drama after another. "Karen and I are going on a trip, a necessary business venture to Hawaii. We'll be gone for a few weeks." My heart sank. Of course, another trip, another excuse to abandon his responsibilities. But this time, the sting was sharper, the betrayal more acute. "You're leaving me here alone? To take care of your mother by myself?" I fought to keep my voice steady. "Don't be dramatic," Rachel scoffed. "You're more than capable of handling things. Karen and I have important matters to attend to." In the background, I heard Karen's muffled voice, followed by a burst of laughter. The sound grated on my nerves, that a cruel reminder of the disdain they held for me. "But what about us?" I pressed, desperate to make him understand. "What about our marriage?" Rachel sighed, his impatience palpable. "Monica, we'll discuss this when I get back. Just focus on taking care of Mother, all right?" The line went dead, leaving me clutching the phone, a torrent of emotions swirling within me. Anger, hurt, frustration, they all coalesced into a burning determination. If Rachel and Karen thought they could just discard me, treat me like some disposable servant, they were sorely mistaken. I was done being the meek, obedient wife. It was time to take action. Over the next few days, I threw myself into caring for Judith, channeling my pent-up energy into ensuring her every need was met. But even as I tended to her, my mind was whirring, formulating a plan. I knew there were secrets lurking beneath the surface of this family, dark undercurrents that Rachel and Karen were desperate to keep hidden, and I intended to uncover them all, one by one. Judith, bless her soul, seemed to sense my determination. She would watch me with a knowing look in her eyes, offering subtle words of encouragement. "You're a strong woman, Monica," she said one day as I helped her with her exercises. "Don't let them break your spirit." Her words only fueled my resolve. If Judith, who had endured years of neglect from her own children, could still find the strength to persevere, then so could I. As the days ticked by, I began to notice little things: whispered phone calls, furtive glances, a strange tension in the air. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion. And then, one fateful afternoon, I stumbled upon a clue that would unravel everything. I was changing the linens in Rachel's study when a loose floorboard caught my eye. Curiosity piqued, I pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. And there, nestled among the dust and cobwebs, was a stack of envelopes addressed to Rachel in an unfamiliar handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened one, my eyes widening as I scanned the contents. It was a love letter, filled with intimate details and endearments, signed by a woman named Samantha. The pieces began to fall into place: Rachel's frequent business trips, his dismissive attitude towards me, the secrets he so desperately tried to conceal. He was having an affair, right under my nose. But as I dug deeper, poring over the letters and the accompanying photos, a sickening realization dawned on me. This wasn't just a casual fling. It was a long-term betrayal that had been going on for years, even before our marriage. White-hot fury coursed through my veins, burning away any lingering doubts or hesitations. Rachel had made a fool of me, disrespected me in the most profound way possible, and now he would pay the price. As I carefully replaced the floorboard, a steely determination settled over me. No more would I be the meek, submissive wife. It was time to take back control, to expose the truth and make Rachel face the consequences of his actions. The false tranquility that had blanketed this household was about to be shattered, and I would be the one wielding the hammer. The days crawled by in a blur of monotony and exhaustion. With Rachel and Karen gone, the burden of caring for Judith fell squarely on my shoulders. I rose before dawn and worked well into the night, tending to her every need with a dutiful diligence that belied the turmoil simmering beneath the surface. Judith, bless her soul, seemed to sense my inner struggle. She would watch me with those keen, knowing eyes, offering words of encouragement and support when I felt like crumbling under the weight of it all. "You're a remarkable woman, Monica," she would say, her frail hands squeezing mine. "Don't let them break you." Her words were a lifeline, a reminder that I was not alone in this battle against Rachel and Karen's callous disregard. Judith, too, had suffered at the hands of her own children's neglect, and yet she persevered with a quiet strength that humbled me. It was during one of our late-night talks that the first crack in the facade appeared. Judith had been unusually restless that evening, fidgeting and casting furtive glances around the room. "Monica, dear," she whispered, her voice trembling with urgency, "I need to show you something." Before I could respond, she had thrown off her blankets and swung her legs over the side of the bed. To my utter astonishment, she rose to her feet, standing tall and steady, a far cry from the frail, bedridden woman I had grown accustomed to. "But how?" I stammered, my eyes wide. Judith offered me a sly smile. "Let's just say I've been playing a little game of my own with Rachel and Karen." She crossed the room with surprising agility, retrieving a battered shoebox from the back of her closet. Inside were stacks of documents, checkbooks, and bank statements, a veritable treasure trove of financial records. "I've been keeping an eye on their dealings for years," Judith confided, her voice laced with bitterness. "Those ungrateful children of mine have been bleeding me dry, siphoning off funds for their own selfish desires." As she spread the documents before me, the full scope of Rachel and Karen's deception became clear. Forged signatures, hidden accounts, embezzled funds, it was all there, a tangled web of greed and betrayal. They thought they could pull the wool over my eyes, Judith spat, her eyes flashing with righteous anger, but I've been on to their games for far too long. In that moment, a profound shift occurred within me. The meek, downtrodden woman I had been mere weeks ago was gone, replaced by a steely resolve that mirrored Judith's own. If she, an elderly woman betrayed by her own flesh and blood, could find the strength to fight back, then so could I. As Judith and I pored over the damning evidence, a plan began to take shape. A plan to not only expose Rachel and Karen's misdeeds, but to reclaim the power and dignity they had so callously stripped from us. "We'll make them pay, Monica," Judith vowed, her voice laced with determination. "They'll rue the day they ever underestimated us." And so a covert alliance was forged, one built on shared pain and a burning desire for retribution. Judith and I became co-conspirators, united in our quest to unravel the tangled web of lies and deceit that had ensnared us both. As the days ticked by, our clandestine efforts intensified. We pored over financial records, meticulously documenting every discrepancy and irregularity. We strategized, plotting our every move with the precision of seasoned generals preparing for battle. And through it all, a newfound strength blossomed within me, a strength born of Judith's unwavering support and my own indomitable spirit. The shackles of oppression that had once bound me were falling away, replaced by a fierce determination to take back control of my life. Rachel and Karen might have thought they had me cornered, but they had gravely underestimated the power of two women scorned. The tides were turning, and soon the reckoning they so richly deserved would be upon them. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of clandestine activity. Judith and I became co-conspirators, united in our quest to dismantle the web of lies and deceit that had ensnared us both. Under the guise of caring for her ailing mother, I meticulously rearranged the household finances, diverting funds back into Judith's accounts and cutting off Rachel and Karen's access to her assets. With each transaction, I felt a surge of empowerment, reclaiming the control they had so callously stripped from us. Judith, for her part, was a force to be reckoned with. Gone was the frail, bedridden woman I had first encountered. In her place stood a formidable ally, her mind sharp and her determination unwavering. "They thought they could bleed me dry," she would say, her eyes flashing with righteous anger. "But they underestimated the lengths a mother will go to protect what's hers." Together, we pored over financial records, cross-checking every transaction, every withdrawal, every cent that had been siphoned away by Rachel and Karen's greed. It was a painstaking process, but one that fueled our resolve with each damning piece of evidence we uncovered. As the days ticked by, our clandestine efforts intensified. We held hushed conversations late into the night, strategizing our every move with the precision of seasoned generals preparing for battle. Judith's rehabilitation progressed in secret, her newfound strength a testament to the indomitable spirit that burned within her, and through it all, a profound shift occurred within me. The meek, downtrodden woman I had once been was no more, replaced by a steely resolve forged in the fires of betrayal and oppression. I was no longer content to simply weather the storm. I was determined to turn the tide, to reclaim the power and dignity that had been so callously stripped from me. With each passing day, our preparations grew more intricate, our plans more meticulously crafted. We rearranged the household staff, ensuring only those loyal to Judith remained. We secured copies of crucial documents, building an ironclad case against Rachel and Karen's misdeeds. And all the while the anticipation mounted, a palpable tension that crackled in the air like static electricity. We knew the reckoning was coming, the moment when the carefully constructed facade would shatter and the truth would be laid bare for all to see. As the date of Rachel and Karen's return drew near, a sense of calm settled over me. Gone were the doubts and insecurities that had once plagued me. In their place was a steely resolve, a quiet confidence born of the knowledge that we held the upper hand. The night before their arrival, Judith and I shared a final hushed conversation, our voices laced with determination. "Tomorrow the gloves come off," Judith declared, her eyes blazing with intensity. "No more hiding, no more pretenses. It's time to make them face the consequences of their actions." I nodded, my jaw set. They won't know what hit them. As we parted ways, a sense of purpose coursed through my veins. The stage was set, the players in position. All that remained was for the curtain to rise on the final act of our grand performance. The following morning, I rose before dawn, my nerves thrumming with anticipation. This was it, the moment we had been preparing for, the culmination of weeks of meticulous planning and unwavering determination. As I went about my morning routine, a strange sense of calm washed over me. Gone were the doubts and insecurities that had once plagued me. In their place was a quiet confidence, a knowledge that I was finally in control of my own destiny. The sound of the front door opening jolted me from my reverie. Showtime. I steeled myself, squaring my shoulders and lifting my chin. No more would I cower in the face of Rachel and Karen's cruelty. Today, the tables would turn, and they would be the ones forced to confront the consequences of their actions. As they swept into the foyer, tanned and relaxed from their Hawaiian getaway, I felt a surge of satisfaction at the looks of surprise on their faces. They had expected to find a meek, subservient housewife, but what they encountered was a woman reborn, a phoenix rising from the ashes of her former self. "Welcome home," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "We have much to discuss." The moment Rachel and Karen swept through the door, tanned and relaxed from their Hawaiian getaway, I knew the game was afoot. They had expected to find a meek, subservient housewife, but what they encountered was a woman reborn, a phoenix rising from the ashes of her former self. "Welcome home," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "We have much to discuss." Rachel's brow furrowed as he took in the scene before him. The stacks of financial records, the steely determination etched into my features. "Monica, what is all this?" Before he could utter another word, Judith emerged from the shadows, her posture erect and her eyes blazing with a fire I had never seen before. "It's time you faced the truth, son," she said, her voice laced with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "The lies, the deceit, the utter disrespect you've shown not just to Monica, but to me as well." Karen's eyes widened as she took in her mother's transformation. "Mother, what's going on here?" "What's going on," I interjected, "is that we've uncovered the truth about your little schemes, the embezzlement, the misappropriation of funds. It all ends now." Rachel's face paled as I laid out the evidence before them: bank statements, canceled checks, a paper trail that left no room for doubt. His hands trembled as he sifted through the damning documents, his carefully constructed facade crumbling with each new revelation. How did you find all this?" he stammered, his eyes darting between Judith and me. "Did you really think you could pull the wool over our eyes forever?" Judith scoffed. "I may be old, but I'm not a fool. I've known about your misdeeds for years, but I never imagined you'd stoop so low as to betray your own wife." It was then that I revealed the final piece of evidence, the love letters and intimate photos that had set this entire chain of events in motion. "You've been having an affair, Rachel," I said, my voice laced with a mixture of hurt and righteous anger. "With a woman named Samantha. For years, you've been lying to me, disrespecting me, treating me like some hired help instead of your wife." Karen's eyes widened in shock, but Rachel merely shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "So what?" he sneered. "You think a few love letters and some financial mismanagement give you the right to turn on your own family?" His words cut deep, but I refused to let him see my pain. Instead, I met his gaze with a steely resolve that seemed to unnerve him. "This isn't about turning on anyone, Rachel," I said. "This is about reclaiming the dignity and respect you've so callously stripped from us, from me, and from your own mother." Judith stepped forward, her frail frame belying the strength of her conviction. "You've taken advantage of me for the last time, son. From now on, I'll be the one calling the shots. And if you think for 1 second that I'll let you continue to mistreat Monica, you're sorely mistaken." Rachel's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought he might lash out. But then something shifted in his demeanor, a flicker of fear passing across his features as he realized the true extent of our alliance. Karen, ever the opportunist, seized the moment to try and regain control of the situation. "Mother, you can't be serious," she pleaded. "Think of the family name, the legacy we've built. You can't just throw it all away on some misguided sense of loyalty to this outsider." But Judith was having none of it. "The only ones who have tarnished this family's name are you and your brother," she spat. "With your greed, your selfishness, your utter disregard for anyone but yourselves." As the confrontation escalated, the true depths of Rachel and Karen's depravity were laid bare. Long-buried grievances and resentments bubbled to the surface, tearing through the carefully constructed facade of familial harmony. Through it all, I stood tall, my resolve unwavering. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the culmination of weeks of careful planning and unwavering determination. And as the dust settled, one thing became abundantly clear. The balance of power had shifted, and Rachel and Karen were no longer the ones calling the shots. With Judith's support and the weight of the evidence on our side, we had exposed their true natures, their selfish motivations, and callous disregard for anyone but themselves. And in doing so, we had reclaimed the control they had so ruthlessly stripped from us. As Rachel and Karen sputtered and raged, their once formidable personas reduced to petulant tantrums, I felt a sense of triumph wash over me. The shackles of oppression had been broken, and a new chapter was about to begin, one where I would never again be subjugated or disrespected. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. There would be more confrontations, more challenges to face as we worked to dismantle the toxic legacy Rachel and Karen had built. But for the first time in a long time, I felt truly empowered, emboldened by the knowledge that I was no longer alone. With Judith by my side, a newfound ally and confidant, I knew that no obstacle was too great, no adversary too formidable. We had faced down the demons of our past and emerged victorious, and nothing would ever be the same again. The confrontation that followed was like a dam bursting, unleashing a torrent of long-buried grievances and resentments that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. As Rachel and Karen sputtered and raged, their once formidable personas reduced to petulant tantrums, the true depths of their depravity were laid bare. Accusations flew, bitter recriminations echoing off the walls as the carefully constructed facade of familial harmony shattered into a million pieces. Through it all, I stood tall, my resolve unwavering. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the culmination of weeks of careful planning and unwavering determination. And with Judith by my side, a newfound ally and confidant, I knew that no obstacle was too great, no adversary too formidable. Rachel, his eyes wild with a mixture of anger and fear, lashed out like a cornered animal. "You think you've won, don't you?" he spat, his words laced with venom. "You think a few financial discrepancies and some tawdry love letters give you the right to turn on your own family?" But Judith was having none of it. "Don't you dare try to twist this around, son," she said, her voice trembling with a lifetime's worth of pent-up frustration. "You and your sister have been bleeding me dry for years, taking advantage of my trust and my love for your own selfish gain. Karen, ever the opportunist, tried to deflect the blame onto me. She's poisoned you against us, Mother," she pleaded. "Can't you see she's just an outsider trying to tear this family apart for her own benefit?" But Judith's resolve was unshakable. "The only ones who have tarnished this family's name are you and your brother," she spat. "With your greed, your selfishness, your utter disregard for anyone but yourselves." As the arguments raged on, the true motivations behind Rachel and Karen's actions became painfully clear. Rachel, driven by a deep-seated sense of entitlement and a desire for material wealth, had seen his mother's assets as a personal piggy bank to be plundered at his whim. And Karen, bitter and resentful, had harbored a lifelong grudge against her brother, feeling overshadowed and unloved. Her spite towards me was merely an extension of that deep-rooted resentment, a misguided attempt to regain some semblance of control over a life that had always seemed to slip through her fingers. Through it all, my role became clear, to be the advocate, the voice of reason that guided Judith through the maelstrom of emotions and betrayals. With my support, she reclaimed control over her assets, her finances, her very life that had been so callously stripped from her by her own children. And as the dust settled, the true extent of Rachel and Karen's misdeeds became painfully clear. The embezzlement, the financial mismanagement, the utter disregard for their own mother's well-being, it was all laid bare, a damning indictment of their selfishness and greed. But even as they faced the consequences of their actions, Even as the weight of their transgressions threatened to crush them, they remained defiant, lashing out with bitter recriminations and empty threats. "You'll regret this, Mother," Karen spat, her eyes blazing with fury. "We're your only family, and you've turned your back on us for that outsider." Rachel, his once charming facade crumbling, tried a different tack. "Think about what you're doing," he pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. "We're blood, Mother. Surely that counts for something." But Judith was unmoved, her resolve steeled by years of neglect and betrayal. "Blood means nothing if it's poisoned by greed and selfishness," she said, her voice heavy with sadness. "You made your choices, and now you must face the consequences." As Rachel and Karen stormed out, their threats and recriminations echoing in their wake, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The battle had been won, the illusions shattered, and the path forward was clear. Judith turned to me, her eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and newfound strength. "Thank you, Monica," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "For everything." I nodded, feeling a profound sense of connection with this remarkable woman who had endured so much. "We did it together," I replied, taking her hand in mine. "And now we can start anew, free from the shackles of their manipulation and deceit." As we stood there, united in our resolve, I knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous. There would be more battles to fight, more obstacles to overcome, as we worked to dismantle the toxic legacy Rachel and Karen had left in their wake. But for the first time in a long time, I felt truly empowered, emboldened by the knowledge that I was no longer alone. With Judith by my side, a kindred spirit and a fellow warrior, I knew that no challenge was too great, no adversary too formidable. The shattered illusions of the past had given way to a new reality, one forged in the fires of resilience and determination. And as we stepped forward into the unknown, I felt a sense of purpose and resolve that had been absent for far too long. The journey ahead would be long, but with Judith at my side, I knew that we would emerge victorious, our bond forged in the crucible of adversity and our spirits tempered by the flames of redemption. The aftermath of the confrontation was like a whirlwind, a flurry of activity, as Judith and I worked to dismantle the toxic legacy Rachel and Karen had left in their wake. With their departure, a weight had been lifted, and a newfound sense of purpose propelled us forward. The first order of business was securing Judith's assets and ensuring that Rachel and Karen could no longer siphon funds for their own selfish desires. It was a painstaking process, one that involved poring over financial records and closing loopholes they had exploited for years. But with each account secured, each paper trail severed, I felt a surge of empowerment. This was more than just righting a financial wrong. It was a symbolic reclamation of the control and dignity they had so callously stripped from us. As the dust settled, Judith and I turned our attention to the future, a future free from the shackles of their manipulation and deceit. For me, that meant leaving the sprawling Victorian house that had once felt like a gilded cage and striking out on my own. With Judith's blessing and the financial means she had reclaimed, I found a cozy apartment in the heart of the city, a sanctuary where I could begin to rebuild my life on my own terms. The process of divorce was swift and decisive, a clean break from the toxic marriage that had nearly broken me. And as I settled into my new surroundings, a sense of peace washed over me. Gone were the constant reminders of Rachel's betrayal, the echoes of Karen's cruel barbs. In their place was a newfound sense of freedom, a liberation from the oppressive weight of their expectations and demands. But even as I embraced this new chapter, I knew that my journey was far from over. The scars of their emotional abuse ran deep, and there were moments when the ghosts of the past threatened to overwhelm me. It was during those times that I turned to my oldest friend and confidant, Ben Peterson. A fellow caregiver from my days before marriage, Ben had been a constant source of support and encouragement, urging me to confront my oppressors and reclaim my independence. "You're a survivor, Monica," he would say, his warm smile and unwavering belief in me a balm for my wounded soul. "You faced down demons that would have crushed lesser women, and you've emerged stronger for it." With Ben's guidance, I began to rebuild not just my life, but my sense of self-worth. I found a job at a prestigious caregiving agency where my skills and experience were valued and respected. and as I immersed myself in my work, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder of the woman I had been before Rachel's betrayal had nearly broken me. But even as I forged ahead, Judith's journey was just beginning. With her assets secured and her children's influence finally severed, she made the bold decision to leave the Victorian house behind and start anew. I'll never forget the day she called me, her voice trembling with excitement. "Monica, I've found the most wonderful retirement community," she gushed. "A place where I can truly live, surrounded by people who appreciate me for who I am, not what I can provide them." As I helped her pack up her belongings and bid farewell to the house that had been both a prison and a sanctuary, I saw a transformation unfold before my eyes. Gone was the frail, downtrodden woman I had first encountered, replaced by a vibrant, radiant soul who had reclaimed her zest for life. In the months that followed, Judith flourished in her new surroundings, embracing a world of new experiences and friendships. She took up painting, traveled to exotic locales, and even found a special someone, a kind-hearted widower who cherished her for the remarkable woman she was. And as I watched her blossom, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude and kinship. Judith had been my ally, my co-conspirator in the battle against Rachel and Karen's oppression. And now, we were both reaping the rewards of our hard-won victory, basking in the freedom and self-respect we had so fiercely fought for. As for Rachel and Karen, their names were rarely spoken, their influence reduced to distant echoes of a past we had both left behind. The toxic legacy they had tried to impose upon us had been dismantled, brick by brick, until nothing remained but the ashes of their own hubris and greed. In those rare moments when their memory did surface, it was met with a sense of indifference, a testament to the growth and resilience Judith and I had cultivated. They were mere footnotes in the grand narrative of our lives, footnotes that held no power over us any longer. And as I looked to the future, a future filled with possibility and promise, I couldn't help but feel a sense of profound gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this point. The path had been arduous, fraught with pain and betrayal, but it had also forged me into the woman I was today, strong, resilient, and unbreakable. The shackles of oppression had been cast off, and a new horizon beckoned, one where Judith and I could bask in the warmth of hard-won freedom and self-respect. It was a future we had fought for, tooth and nail, and one that we would embrace with open arms unburdened by the weight of the past. I never knew silence could be so loud until I watched my brother's facade crumble, revealing a stranger beneath. The words seemed to echo in the stillness of the room, hanging like a dense fog after Marla's venomous attack on our mother, Elaine. Her lips curled into a smirk as she taunted, "You're just too meek and insignificant to stand up for yourself." I glanced at Everett, my brother, expecting him to defend our gentle mother, but he remained impassive, a hollow shell of the man I once knew. It was as if Marla's venom had seeped into his veins, numbing him to her cruelty. Rage boiled within me, and I found myself stepping forward, fists clenched. "How dare you speak to her that way?" I spat, my voice trembling with fury. Marla's eyes narrowed, and she sneered. "Stay out of this, Cadence. It doesn't concern you." "Like hell it doesn't," I roared, closing the distance between us. "That's my mother you're berating, and I won't stand for it." Everett finally stirred, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Cadence, please, let it go." I shrugged him off, incredulous. "Let it go? Are you hearing yourself? She's treating Mom like garbage, and you're just letting it happen." Marla's laughter cut through the tension like a knife. "Poor, pathetic Elaine. She's lucky I even bother with her." She turned to Everett, her voice dripping with saccharine venom. "You see how she is, darling? Always needing to be coddled and fawned over." Everett's gaze dropped, and he nodded meekly, like a puppy being scolded. My heart broke for the brother I once knew, the confident, caring man who would have never tolerated such abuse. "Enough!" I roared, stepping between them. "I don't know what kind of twisted game you're playing, Marla, but it ends now. You will treat my mother with respect, or you can pack your bags and leave." Marla's eyes with fury, and for a moment I thought she might strike me. But then, as quickly as the storm had gathered, it dissipated, and she offered a sickly sweet smile. "Of course, Cadence, you're absolutely right. I'll be sure to watch my tongue around dear Elaine from now on." She swept past me, brushing my shoulder with hers as she exited the room. Everett followed her like a lost puppy, leaving me alone with my stunned mother. I gathered her into my arms, feeling her frail body tremble with silent sobs. "It's okay, Mom," I murmured, stroking her graying hair. "I won't let her hurt you anymore." As I held her close, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Marla's true nature had been revealed, and I knew in my heart that I had to protect my family, no matter the cost. The next few days were like walking on eggshells, each interaction fraught with tension. Marla's saccharine smiles were laced with venom, and Everett remained a hollow shell, refusing to acknowledge the rift that had formed. It wasn't until I stopped by Mom's house unannounced that the full extent of Marla's villainy became apparent. "Mom?" I called out as I stepped inside, taken aback by the unusual disarray. Dishes were piled high in the sink, and the floors were in desperate need of a vacuum. "In here, dear," came her weary voice from the living room. I found her slumped in her favorite armchair, a blanket draped over her lap as she knitted what appeared to be a scarf. Dark circles hung beneath her eyes, and her movements were slow and labored. "Mom, are you all right?" I asked, crossing the room to her side. She offered a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, darling. Just a bit tired, that's all." I frowned, taking in her disheveled appearance and the state of the house. "Have you been cooking and cleaning for Everett and Marla again?" Her gaze dropped, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. White-hot anger flared within me. "That's it. I'm putting a stop to this right now." Before she could protest, I was out the door and marching down the street towards Everett's place. I pounded on the door, barely containing my fury. Everett answered, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Cadence? What's going on?" "What's going on?" I echoed, jabbing a finger into his chest. "Your wife is running my mother ragged. That's what's going on." His eyes widened, and he glanced over his shoulder as if afraid Marla might overhear. "Keep your voice down," he hissed, stepping outside and pulling the door shut behind him. "I won't keep my voice down," I shouted, uncaring of who might hear. "Mom is exhausted, Everett. She's cooking, cleaning, and running herself into the ground just to keep Marla happy." He ran a hand over his face, his expression pained. I know. But Marla, she gets upset if things aren't just so." I stared at him, aghast. "Are you hearing yourself? You're letting her walk all over Mom because she throws a tantrum if she doesn't get her way?" Everett's shoulders slumped, and he dropped his gaze. "It's not that simple, Cadence. Marla, she has a way of making things difficult if I don't go along with what she wants." My hands balled into fists at my sides. "So what, you're just going to let her bully and manipulate all of us? Stand up for yourself, Everett. Stand up for our family." His jaw clenched, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the brother I once knew. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, and he shook his head wearily. "I can't, Cadence. I'm sorry." With those words, he retreated back into the house, leaving me seething on the doorstep. As I stormed away, I knew that this was only the beginning. Marla's twisted grip on my family was tightening, and I had to find a way to break it before it was too late. Frustration gnawed at me in the days that followed. Everett's submission to Marla's twisted demands was like watching a man slowly drown, and I knew I had to act before it was too late. "We need to find out more about her," I told Theo one evening as we prepared dinner. My husband's brow furrowed, but he nodded, sensing the resolve in my voice. That night, after the dishes were done, we began our search. Scouring the internet for any trace of Marla's past, we slowly pieced together a disturbing pattern. "Look at this," Theo murmured, his eyes glued to the screen. "It seems Marla was briefly married to a wealthy businessman a few years back. But the marriage only lasted 6 months before he filed for divorce, citing emotional distress and manipulation." I leaned closer, my heart sinking as I read the details. And here's another. She was engaged to a prominent lawyer, but he broke it off after discovering she'd been lying about her background and finances. Page after page painted a chilling portrait of a woman who thrived on deceit and exploitation. Marla would charm and seduce wealthy men, leeching off their fortunes until they inevitably saw through her facade. Then she would move on to her next target, leaving a trail of broken hearts and empty bank accounts in her wake. "She's a black widow," I whispered, feeling ill, "and Everett is her latest victim." Theo squeezed my hand, his expression grim. We have to show him, Cadence. We have to make him see the truth before it's too late. I nodded, my jaw set with determination. The next day, I invited Everett over under the guise of a casual family dinner. As we sat around the table, I could see the tension in his posture, the way his eyes kept flicking towards the door, as if he expected Marla to burst in at any moment. Everett, I began, keeping my voice level. We need to talk about Marla. He stiffened, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the table. What about her? I took a steadying breath and launched into the details we'd uncovered, the string of failed marriages and broken engagements, the pattern of exploitation and deceit. As I spoke, I watched the color drain from Everett's face. He shook his head vehemently, his eyes wide with denial. No, you've got it all wrong. Marla would never. But the evidence was irrefutable, and with each new revelation, I could see the cracks in his facade deepening. Finally, when I had laid bare the full extent of Marla's machinations, Everett slumped in his chair, burying his face in his hands. How could I have been so blind? He whispered, his voice thick with anguish. I reached across the table, resting my hand on his arm. It's not too late, Everett. We can stop her before she destroys our family. He lifted his head, and I saw a flicker of the old Everett, the fierce determination that had once burned so brightly. You're right, he said, his jaw set. It's time to end this. As we began to formulate our plan, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. The veil had been lifted, and now it was time to take back control from the woman who had wrought so much pain and misery. The confrontation with Marla was like a powder keg waiting to ignite. Everett and I had agreed to approach her together, our united front bolstered by the damning evidence we'd uncovered. I could sense Everett's trepidation as we stood on the doorstep of his home, but there was a newfound determination in his eyes that filled me with hope. Marla answered the door, her perfectly coiffed hair and immaculate makeup a stark contrast to the sneer that twisted her features. Well, if it isn't the dynamic duo, she drawled, her gaze flickering between us with thinly veiled disdain. To what do I owe the pleasure? Cut the act, Marla, I spat, pushing past her into the house. We know what you've been up to. Her brows shot up, but her expression remained infuriatingly smug. And what, pray tell, have I been up to? Everett stepped forward, squaring his shoulders. We know about your past, Marla. The marriages, the engagements, all the men you've manipulated and exploited for their money. For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a derisive laugh. Oh, Everett, you can't possibly believe these ridiculous accusations, can you? She sidled up to him, trailing a manicured hand down his arm. Your sister is just jealous, darling. She's always resented our happiness. I opened my mouth to protest, but Everett held up a hand, his gaze boring into hers. Don't bother, Marla, he said, his voice low and steady. We have proof, documents, records, testimonies from your past victims. It's over. Her eyes narrowed to slits, and for the first time I saw the true depths of her malice laid bare. You ungrateful wretch, she hissed, her words dripping with venom. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Everett remained unmoved, his jaw set in a firm line. You've done nothing but lie and manipulate, Marla. It ends now. With a snarl of rage, she turned on me, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my arm as she grabbed me. This is all you're doing, you meddling bitch, she spat, her face contorted in fury. You're just jealous that your pathetic life will never measure up to mine. Before I could react, Everett had wedged himself between us, his hands gripping Marla's wrists as he pried her away. That's enough, he growled, his eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't seen in years. You're done manipulating this family, Marla. It's over. She struggled against his grip, her eyes wild with desperation. You'll regret this, Everett, she shrieked. I'll make sure you lose everything, your job, your money, your precious family. But her threats rang hollow, her carefully constructed facade lying in shattered pieces at our feet. As Everett hauled her towards the door, she turned her vitriol on me once more. You think you've won? She snarled. This is far from over, Cadence. Mark my words, you'll pay for this. And with that, she was gone, her angry screams echoing down the street as Everett slammed the door behind her. We stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of what had transpired hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Everett turned to me, his expression a mixture of shame and gratitude. "Thank you," he murmured, pulling me into a fierce embrace. "You saved me from a lifetime of misery." As I held him, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph amidst the turmoil. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Marla's threats still lingered, a reminder that her vindictive nature knew no bounds. But in that moment, with my brother by my side once more, I knew we could weather any storm she threw our way. The family she had tried so desperately to fracture was now stronger than ever, and we would face her wrath together, united and unbreakable. In the days following Marla's explosive departure, a fragile peace settled over our family. Everett seemed lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders, but I knew better than to let my guard down. Marla's parting threat still echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was biding her time, plotting her next move. So when Theo came to me one evening, his expression grim, I steeled myself for the worst. "Cadence," he began, settling beside me on the couch. "I think we have a problem." My heart dropped, and I braced myself for whatever bombshell he was about to unleash. "I just got off the phone with your dad," he continued. "Apparently, Marla has been pressuring Everett to sell the family home." A chill ran down my spine as the implications sank in. The house wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of our family's legacy, a place where countless memories had been forged. "She's trying to isolate him," I murmured, my hands clenching into fists. "Strip away everything that ties him to us so she can worm her way back in." Theo nodded grimly. "Your dad said Everett has been reluctant, but Marla is relentless. She's playing on his guilt, telling him it's the only way to make a fresh start." White-hot anger surged through me, and I shot to my feet, pacing the length of the living room. "That conniving snake," I spat. "After everything she's done, she still has the audacity to try and tear our family apart." Theo caught my arm, pulling me to a halt. "Cadence, we have to do something. If she succeeds in getting Everett to sell the house, it'll be that much harder to break her hold over him." I took a deep breath, tamping down the fury that threatened to consume me. Theo was right. We needed a plan, a way to make Everett see the truth before it was too late. "Call Dad," I said, my voice steely with resolve. "Tell him we're staging an intervention tonight. It's time to put an end to Marla's games once and for all." A few hours later, we were gathered in the living room of the family home. Mom, Dad, Everett, Theo, and myself. The tension was thick, Everett's eyes darting toward the exits as if he expected Marla to burst through the door at any moment. "What's this all about?" he demanded, his gaze finally landing on me. I took a steadying breath, squaring my shoulders. "It's about Marla," I said, holding his gaze, "and her latest attempt to manipulate you into selling this house." His eyes widened and he opened his mouth to protest, but I forged ahead. "Don't try to deny it, Everett. We know she's been pressuring you, playing on your guilt and insecurities. But can't you see? This is just another ploy to isolate you from your family, to make you dependent on her again." Everett's jaw clenched, and he shook his head vehemently. "You're wrong, Cadence. Marla just wants what's best for us, a fresh start away from all the drama and conflict." I scoffed, feeling the frustration mount. "Wake up, Everett. She's the one causing all the drama and conflict. She's a toxic parasite, and she'll never stop until she's drained every last ounce of life from this family." The words hung heavy in the air, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw Mom rise from her chair, her face etched with a determination I'd never seen before. "Your sister is right, Everett," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "That woman's caused nothing but pain and misery since the day she wormed her way into our lives." She crossed the room, laying a hand on his arm. "This house is our home, our legacy. Please don't let her take that away from us." Everett's gaze flickered between us, his expression a whirlwind of emotions. I could see the battle raging within him, the struggle between Marla's poisonous influence and the love for his family. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "You're right," he whispered, his voice thick with shame. "I've been so blind, so desperate to make things work with Marla that I've nearly lost everything that truly matters." He looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I won't let her win, not this time. The house stays, and Marla—" He swallowed hard. Marla is out of our lives for good. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, love and loyalty had prevailed over Marla's twisted machinations. As we gathered around Everett, enveloping him in an embrace, I knew that our family was finally on the path to healing. The shadows that had lingered for so long were fading, and a new dawn was on the horizon, one where Marla's poisonous influence could no longer reach us. The day of Mom's birthday celebration dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. As I helped her prepare for the party, arranging platters of her famous lemon bars and hanging streamers, I couldn't shake the sense of anticipation that buzzed through my veins. This was it. The culmination of weeks of planning, the moment when we would finally expose Marla's true nature to the world and break her hold over Everett once and for all. "You seem tense, dear," Mom murmured, laying a gentle hand on my arm. "Is everything all right?" I forced a smile, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Everything's fine, Mom. Just want to make sure your party is perfect." She returned my smile, her eyes shining with affection. "As long as my family is here, it will be." As the guests began to arrive, the house filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation, a temporary reprieve from the turmoil that had plagued us for far too long. Everett arrived with a hesitant smile, his gaze constantly flicking towards the door as if expecting Marla to make an appearance. "It's going to be all right," I murmured, pulling him aside. "We're going to put an end to her lies once and for all." He nodded, his jaw set with determination, and rejoined the party. As the afternoon wore on, I could feel the tension mounting, the calm before the storm. Finally, when the last of the guests had arrived, I caught Theo's eye and gave him a subtle nod. It was time. Clearing my throat, I clinked my glass, calling for silence. "If I could have everyone's attention, please." The room gradually fell quiet, all eyes turning towards me with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. "First and foremost," I began, "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate my incredible mother on her birthday." A smattering of applause rippled through the crowd, and Mom ducked her head shyly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "However," I continued, my voice growing steely, "there is another reason we've gathered you all here today." I locked eyes with Everett, giving him a subtle nod of encouragement before turning my attention back to the assembled guests. For far too long, a dark shadow has loomed over this family, a poisonous presence that has sought to divide and manipulate us for her own selfish gain. My gaze swept over the crowd, daring anyone to look away. I'm speaking, of course, about Marla. A hush fell over the room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Everett tense, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the back of a chair. "Marla has woven a tangled web of lies and deceit," I pressed on, my voice ringing with conviction. "She has exploited and preyed upon my brother, leeching off his fortune and manipulating him into cutting ties with those who truly care about him." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd, but I forged ahead, laying bare the evidence we had gathered, the trail of broken engagements and failed marriages, the testimonies from her past victims. As I spoke, I could see the shock and revulsion etched on the faces of our guests, the realization sinking in that they had been duped by Marla's carefully constructed facade. Finally, when every last sordid detail had been exposed, I turned my gaze to Everett, who stood frozen, his eyes wide with a mixture of shame and relief. "It's over, Everett," I said softly. "You're free of her poison." For a long moment he remained motionless, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Then, slowly, he straightened his shoulders, his features hardening with a newfound resolve. "You're right, Cadence," he said, his voice ringing out across the hushed room. "It's over." Turning on his heel, he strode towards the front door, throwing it open with a resounding bang, and there, frozen on the doorstep with a look of abject horror painted across her features, stood Marla. "You," she sputtered, her perfectly manicured mask cracking as she took in the scene before her. "You can't do this to me." But her protests fell on deaf ears as Everett advanced, his eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't seen in years. "Get out," he growled, his words laced with a finality that brooked no argument. "You're not welcome here. Not anymore." For a beat, Marla seemed poised to argue, her mouth opening and closing like a gasping fish. but as her gaze swept over the sea of accusatory stares, she must have realized the futility of her situation. With a cry of outrage, she whirled on her heel and stormed off into the night, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement as she disappeared from sight. A deafening silence hung in her wake, punctuated only by the occasional murmur or cough. Then, slowly, the tension began to dissipate, replaced by a collective sigh of relief. As I looked around at the faces of my family and friends, I saw nothing but pride and support reflected back at me. We had faced down the darkness that had threatened to consume us, and emerged victorious, battered perhaps, but unbroken. And as Everett turned to me, his eyes shining with unshed tears, I knew that our journey towards healing had truly begun. In the days that followed Marla's explosive banishment from our lives, a palpable shift seemed to ripple through our family. It was as if a great weight had been lifted, a toxic cloud of negativity and manipulation that had hung over us for far too long. Everett, in particular, seemed to undergo a profound transformation. Gone was the haunted, hollow-eyed man who had been so thoroughly cowed by Marla's venom. In his place stood a man reborn, his shoulders squared and his gaze clear and focused. "It's like waking from a nightmare," he confided in me one evening as we sat on the porch, sipping lemonade and basking in the warm evening air. All this time, I was living in a fog, blind to the truth and trapped by her lies. I reached over, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze. "You're free of her now, Everett. We all are." He nodded, his expression solemn. "I just wish I had seen it sooner, before she had the chance to inflict so much pain and damage." A familiar pang of guilt twisted in my gut, but I pushed it aside. Dwelling on regrets would only hold us back from truly healing. "The important thing is that we made it through," I said firmly, "and now we can focus on rebuilding and moving forward as a family." Everett smiled, the weight of Marla's lingering specter seeming to lift from his shoulders. "You're right. It's a new beginning for all of us." As the days stretched into weeks, the true extent of Marla's deception began to unravel. It seemed that her pattern of exploitation and manipulation had cast a wide net, ensnaring countless victims over the years. One by one they emerged from the shadows, emboldened by the news of her downfall and eager to share their stories. Tales of emotional abuse, financial ruin, and shattered lives poured forth, painting a chilling portrait of a woman utterly devoid of conscience or remorse. The fallout was swift and merciless. Marla's carefully constructed house of cards came crashing down around her, leaving her social standing in tatters, and her once abundant finances drained to the dregs. Through it all, Everett remained a pillar of strength, weathering the storm with a newfound resilience that inspired us all. Gone was the guilt and shame that had once weighed him down. In its place was a steely determination to make amends and move forward. "I can't change the past," he said during one of our many heart-to-heart conversations, "but I can damn well make sure the future is better for all of us." And true to his word, he did. With an unwavering focus, he set about rebuilding the relationships that Marla had so callously fractured, starting with our parents. It was a long and often painful process, fraught with difficult conversations and emotional revelations. But through it all, our family remained united, a bond forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by our shared determination to triumph over Marla's poisonous legacy. As for my role, I took it upon myself to be the mediator, the calm voice of reason that helped guide our family through the turbulent waters of healing. It wasn't always easy, and there were times when tempers flared and progress seemed elusive. But I persevered, drawing strength from the knowledge that we were finally on the right path, a path that led away from the shadows and towards the light of a brighter future. And as the weeks turned into months, that future began to take shape before our very eyes. The rifts that had once seemed insurmountable slowly knitted themselves together, replaced by a newfound appreciation for the unbreakable bonds that tied us as a family. It was during one of our Sunday dinners, the table laden with Mom's famous pot roast, and the air filled with laughter and conversation, that I truly realized how far we had come. Gazing around at the smiling faces of my loved ones, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. We had weathered the storm, emerging battered but unbroken, our love and loyalty to one another stronger than ever before. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. A united front, fortified by the knowledge that the darkness that had once threatened to consume us had finally been banished for good. In the aftermath of Marla's explosive departure, a fragile peace settled over our family. It was as if we had all been holding our collective breath, bracing for the next inevitable blow from her twisted machinations. But as the days stretched into weeks and her poisonous presence faded into a distant memory, we slowly began to exhale. Of course, the road to healing was far from smooth. Marla's betrayal had left deep scars, both emotional and financial. Everett, in particular, struggled with the fallout of her deceit, his once thriving business and personal accounts drained to the dregs by her relentless exploitation. "I feel like such a fool," he confided in me one evening, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "How could I have been so blind, so willing to hand over everything I've worked for to that parasite?" I wrapped an arm around his shoulders, offering what comfort I could. "You were manipulated, Everett. She preyed on your trust and twisted your devotion into a weapon against you. But that's over now." He nodded, his jaw clenched with determination. "You're right. It's time to start rebuilding, to take back what she stole from me, from all of us." And rebuild we did, each of us shouldering a share of the burden. Mom and Dad opened their home to Everett, offering him a sanctuary as he sorted through the tangled mess of his finances. Theo, ever the level-headed voice of reason, helped devise a plan to get Everett's business back on track, utilizing his keen business acumen to plug the leaks and stem the tide of financial ruin. As for me, I became the glue that held our fractured family together. I organized weekly dinners, ensuring we all had a regular opportunity to come together and reconnect. I mediated the difficult conversations, lending an understanding ear and offering gentle guidance when tempers flared. It wasn't easy, and there were times when the strain of it all threatened to overwhelm me. But whenever I felt myself wavering, I would think back to those dark days when Marla's poisonous grip had nearly torn us apart, and I would find the strength to persevere. Slowly but surely the cracks began to mend, and our family emerged from the rubble stronger than ever before. Everett's business flourished under Theo's guidance, and he was able to regain his financial footing, a newfound humility and appreciation for the value of hard work shining through. Mom and Dad, too, seemed rejuvenated by the renewed sense of unity that bound us together. Gone were the hollow-eyed resignation and strained silences that had plagued them during Marla's reign of terror. In their place was a warmth and vibrancy that I hadn't seen in years, a reminder of the unbreakable bonds that had sustained our family through countless storms. And as for me, well, I found myself reinvigorated by the knowledge that my unwavering determination had played a pivotal role in our family's salvation. No longer was I content to be a mere bystander in life, watching from the sidelines as others shaped their destinies. I had tasted the power of taking action, of standing up for what was right, and I knew that I could never go back to the way things were before. It was this newfound sense of purpose that drove me to take on a new challenge: the restoration of our family home. The once proud manor had fallen into disrepair during Marla's toxic tenure, its rooms and halls battered by neglect and the weight of her corrosive presence. But now, with her shadow banished and our family united, I saw an opportunity to breathe new life into the heart of our legacy. Enlisting the help of Everett and Theo, we set about the task of restoring the grand old house to its former glory, stripping away the layers of grime and decay to reveal the beauty that had been hidden beneath. It was backbreaking work, filled with long hours and more than a few heated arguments. But through it all, we persevered, fueled by a shared sense of purpose and the knowledge that every nail hammered, every wall sanded, was a tangible symbol of our family's resilience and rebirth. And when the final coat of paint had dried and the last piece of furniture had been carefully arranged, we stood back and marveled at our handiwork. The house fairly glowed, its polished floors and gleaming woodwork a testament to the power of perseverance and love. It was on a warm summer evening, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers, that we gathered on the front porch to celebrate our victory. Mom and Dad, hand in hand, their faces aglow with pride. Everett and Theo, shoulders brushing as they shared a conspiratorial grin. And me, standing in the midst of it all, my heart swelling with a sense of triumph and unbridled joy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, I raised my glass in a silent toast. To family, to resilience, and to the unbreakable bonds that had carried us through the darkest of storms. For in that moment, bathed in the warmth of the fading light, and surrounded by the people I loved most in this world, I knew that we had truly emerged from the shadows, battered, perhaps, but unbroken and more united than ever before. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with new challenges and obstacles to overcome. But as I looked around at the smiling faces of my loved ones, I felt a surge of confidence and determination. Whatever lay ahead, we would face it together. A family forged in the fires of adversity, tempered by the knowledge that our love and loyalty to one another was unshakable. Marla's poisonous legacy had been purged, and in its place a new chapter was beginning. One written in the bonds of unbreakable family, resilience, and hope for a brighter tomorrow.